Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr is attempting to copy and paste the same Rico law used to charge Donald Trump to punish protesters battling police militarization. On Tuesday, 61 people were indicted on racketeering charges over protests against construction of a massive public safety training center opponents call Cop City. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution confirmed that the same grand jury that indicted Trump and his allies on RICO charges was also involved in this case. The protesters and a majority of local residents opposed the 85-acre facility in a forest outside Atlanta in neighboring DeKalb County. Among their concerns, the facility is going to cost $90 million. It will have a massive environmental impact, getting rid of a large forest that keeps down the heat in the area, and the potential for over-policing in Metro Atlanta. Some of the people indicted yesterday already face charges related to the protests, including 3 activists charged with money laundering for running a bail fund, 3 charged with felony intimidation for distributing flyers with the names of police officers allegedly involved in the killing of a protester, and more than 36 people facing domestic terrorism charges, including an attorney who is acting as a legal observer. Joining me now to discuss is Christopher Bruce, Policy Director for the ACLU of Georgia, and Jack Crosby, correspondent for Rolling Stone. Jack, I'll start with you. This is amazing to me in all the worst possible ways. Tell us a little bit about what is going on here. Is this just intimidation, or does this attorney really think they're going to be able to successfully get a bunch of protesters thrown in jail for racketeering?
I mean, in certain cases, he already has. This attorney general and the Georgia Bureau of Investigations have been arresting protesters throughout this movement and putting them in jail for long periods of time in Atlanta's Metropolitan Detention Facility, which is known as one of the worst sort of temporary prisons in the world. And it doesn't really matter to him, I think, whether or not all of these charges stick, what charges stick, because this is the strategy that they've said. If you're connected to this movement whatsoever and you're arrested for basically any crime that could even conceivably be linked to thinking about this movement, you're going to be slapped with some of the most, brutal legal accusations that the state can level against you.
Christopher, I want to sort of move back a bit from not just these sort of RICO charges against protesters, but let's talk a little bit about this whole Cop City situation to begin with. What you have is, this is a $90 million police training facility, even though the Metro Police have another training facility in Macon just about an hour or 2 away. And, quote, the nonprofit Atlanta Police Foundation is working to raise millions for construction. 80% of the money comes from private donations. The foundation's board is filled with executives from nearly all of Atlanta's big-name companies like Delta, Waffle House, the Home Depot, Georgia Pacific, Equifax, Carter, Accenture, Wells Fargo, and UPS, among others. It reads like a who's who of corporate Atlanta. So we're talking about land that is owned by the city of Atlanta, but it's being leased to this private foundation. How the heck does this private foundation have access to this much sort of, government resources? And is this Atlanta Police Foundation putting pressure on government apparatus to go after protesters?
Well, Jason, first, thanks for having me, and thank you for bringing that up, because a lot of these corporations are funding millions of dollars to build a facility instead of investing into the communities, which we know is what really leads to public safety increasing in the state. So yes, not only are these corporations doing this, a lot of these people who run these corporations either do not live in the city of Atlanta or don't even live in the state of Georgia at all. So as what you're talking about is the Atlanta Police Foundation putting pressure on corporations. It could be the other way around. It could be the corporations putting pressure on the Atlanta Police Foundation to increase this. And like you said before, there are other jurisdictions where this is happening. The Atlanta Police Department can train. They have been training. They've been training in other places everywhere else. Do they need an 84-acre facility to do this, known as Cop City? No, they don't. And I believe there's over 100,000 people who have signed signatures to mark that. And that's what the city of Atlanta is going to have to deal with in a referendum coming soon.
Jack, I want to talk a little bit about this referendum because this is what's interesting. A lot of times, if you have local politicians, right, and there's something they want to push through, but they try to wiggle out of it any responsibility, like, oh, we'll have a referendum, but they'll have like the worst wording possible. They'll say like, do you not want me to sort of kind of make this thing happen in a way to sort of get the policies through? But what we're seeing right now is that voting rights activists, according to Mother Jones, voting rights activists in Atlanta are condemning the fact that the Cop City referendum, the state is going to use signature checks and go line by line through these referendums in order to basically invalidate people who might stand against this voting center. First off, talk a little bit about what this signature check may actually look like. And then second, why would anyone want to put together a referendum and then make sure the referendum isn't reflective of the people?
Right. And this is sort of one step in what's been a pretty classic campaign by Atlanta city officials and the people who support the Cop City project to kind of slow down and keep public input out of this process entirely. This goes back to the very beginning, the first proposals for Cop City, and the first time that this actually came before the city council vote, in which there were 17 hours of public comment, which, activists combed through and found that the vast majority of was against Cop City. That vote still went through the city council. It's passed every single time. As far as these signatures being collected goes, this has also been waylaid at every possible opportunity. A federal judge had to rule last month that people who were not residents of the city of Atlanta could still do some of the signature collecting duties. So you obviously have activists who care about this case coming in from all over Georgia and from other places in the country that are wanting to, pound the pavement for this and collect signatures. The signatures must be from Atlanta city residents themselves because it's their tax dollars that may be going to fund this center. But there shouldn't be anything that says that every activist has to prove that they have an Atlanta address to sign these signatures. So the verification process is sort of just another step in this, right. And that despite, over 100,000 signatures collected, they're going to try and throw out as many as they can.
Quick question to you, Bruce. We're running up against a break. Is the mayor going to lose his job over this? Because this seems to be incredibly unpopular. He seems to be in agreement with this foundation to try and slide this thing through, despite sort of the public disenchantment with it. What could be the political consequences in the next mayor's race?
Well, that is the question that's going into this. And me and Mayor Dickens actually disagree about this. I'm against Cop City. But I will respect that he is the mayor of Atlanta. He was elected for that, compared to an attorney general like Chris Carr, who has not only mentioned the 61 indictments, but in that indictment, he mentions that the conspiracy happened during the George Floyd's murder. That happened 11 months before Cop City was proposed in the first place. So not only will there be ramifications in the city of Atlanta, we can also look at the attorney general who is looking at running for governor here, right, and is using this as a political ploy.
Right. Christopher Bruce and Jack Crosby, we were definitely coming back to the story. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on The ReidOut.